everything you need to know about products and services that can improve your life. This is Experts on Call on CL 650.
Oh, I've seen fire and I've seen rain.
I think he intentionally tries to wow us with his song selection. Fire and rain, really? All right. Well done, Dwayne. We're talking about StrataLife and the impacts of different elements of your strata. We have Drew Grout here from Key Pacific Property Management, and you're kind of like the hub and the spokes. Today we are talking about insurance. We have Gordon Lai here from CMW Insurance and Brett Johnson from Community Fire Prevention. Now, Drew, we'll just run through the last couple of questions here, and then we'll get into an interesting one about the Civil Resolution Tribunal, which sounds ominous. We'll find out what that is. The first question is, the first floor owners in our building have patios that are limited common property. The drains are clogged and the patios collect rainwater. The owners on the higher floors resent paying for this work. In the first floor, because the first floor people get to use the patios exclusively. So what's the answer to that?
Well, the Act basically states that people who have limited common property areas assigned for their exclusive use are required to deal with routine maintenance.
At their expense?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, if you got leaves collecting over a drain, the person who lives in that unit should be clearing off that drain. If you had a clog arise from something further down in the line, that's a common line. Strata Corporation will be required to clean that out. Nobody expects an owner on the ground floor to call a plumber out with an auger to auger out the common drains.
But this, like with Key Pacific, this would be part of your ongoing maintenance cycle, maybe, and you're hiring somebody to maintain. You're bringing a contractor in to maintain the building, and they're cleaning out the drains. They just happen to do that one as well. Would that be billed back to them?
Well, cleaning out the drains more often than not doesn't cover clearing off the drains, if I can put it that way.
Right.
If there's a blockage in a drain system, it's going to be cleared. If it's part of the common system, they'll be flushed
especially
annually or
at this time of year where all the leaves are around. And
that's right. So a good example is the roof. Rooftop has drains. The Strata Corporation needs to get somebody up on the roof every now and then to clear away the drains. Just like your gutters, the leaves block it and it causes overflows. Okay. Same thing on ground floor patios. If things aren't, if it isn't clear and clean, then you're going to get blockages. And it's when it gets to that point, it becomes a common expense. Everybody has to share that cost.
So your advice would be to let the person know that's on that ground level, by the way, because you have this extra space and isn't it great, this is something that you need to keep an eye on. Yeah,
it's something that needs to be communicated to all owners, because even on the top floors, they got to clean their decks as well. And they got to do it in a certain fashion not to affect other people. Everybody has a responsibility to maintain their limited common property.
Okay, the next one is a pretty interesting question. I know new bylaws must be passed by 3/4 vote at the annual general meeting. Is that 3/4 of the units of the building or 3/4 of the people in attendance?
Good question. The answer is neither. It's for a resolution to pass, a 3/4 vote resolution to pass, it's passed by a 3/4 of the votes cast have to be cast in favor for it to pass. So you can have 200 people at a AGM, and if only 100 people vote, you need 75 of those votes to be in favor. Doesn't matter, and you don't count abstentions. So it's those in favor, those opposed, abstentions. Did we get 75% of the votes cast in favor?
All right, we're going to switch to Civil Resolution Tribunal. Who wants to answer that? What is that?
It's something that's just, I think, implemented around summertime. It's basically, it's for people to file complaints. It actually incorporates what part of what small claims court did before, and it still does small claims. But also the most important part is that it will be like for claims where people are making, that's governance. So it could be like, I don't think my Strata Corporation follow, for example, this last one, the 3/4 vote rule. Before, you would have to go to the Supreme Court of British Columbia. And
file kind of a lawsuit, right?
Lawsuit, and it's very expensive, so most people don't do it. So now the Civil Resolution Tribunal allows you to do that. And so
is it the courts trying to make it a more cost-effective way for people have access to courts? Is that basically what it is?
That's
more
exactly
accessible.
More accessible.
Doesn't cost much.
Easy access, online, cost-effective.
So tribunal, I'm guessing 3 people hear the case and they decide. Is that how it works?
No, not necessarily. There's a process that everybody who wants to make an application has to follow, and part of it is a vetting process, getting the person to understand what's going on and maybe realize that they don't have a valid claim to make, or the strata has followed their process properly, and
so that's kind of like discovery, right?
Yeah. But it's all online,
right?
It's all online. It's not like you're.
So who is at the other end of that line that's looking at this?
The Civil Rights Tribunal,
right?
And they have
like a case manager.
Case managers assigned to this to deal with it before it gets to a hearing.
Now, Gordon, how does this impact insurance for a strata?
Well, I think in most cases, when people receive this notice from the civil rights, the CRT, they're going to say, well, what do I do with it? I think there's easy ones where they receive it, they read it, and they go, what they're claiming is right or wrong, and either we could fix this problem because we admit to it, or, we did what's right and they respond. But there's definitely cases where people will say, I disagree. So the first thing is that they need to usually is contact us, because depends on what the claim is for, then we will decide as the broker whether that's going to be covered under the director's.
Can you give us an example? Because I'm not really understanding how there would be a claim. Can walk us through sort of an example of that? Like how the strata council would have to pay for something.
So let's go to a more common claim that we see today. They're not asking for damages. So someone writes in and says, the roof above me is leaking from a deck and it's leaking in my unit. It's dripped and it's gone on for 6 months.
Right.
It's not being fixed, and based on the Strata Property Act,
it's supposed to be dealt with. Yeah.
The Strata Corporation needs to resolve this issue and fix the deck. So they're just saying get it fixed. So they would basically file a complaint, then it would go through that process. So they're not asking for monetary damages. They're not saying, I need $5,000 or $10,000 as a result of this. So
but they may.
But the other part is then maybe that triggers an insurance claim to get something repaired, right?
Correct. In this case, though, there wouldn't be an insurance claim.
Because it's a leaky roof.
This is a leaky roof. So then the tribunal would look at it and say, yeah, you know what, Strata Corporation, you need to get this done. So
now, do you need to have, we talked about director's coverage. Is there another layer of insurance that Stratas are going to need because of this new tribunal? Yes.
Well, what happens is that it's very complex in this liability area. So, for example, CMW's got probably one of the best directors and officers liability policies available for Strata Corporation. So we would actually cover that in case where there is a dispute. And the Strata Council or Corporation says, we're going to respond, but we need help and assistance of how to respond. So we would look after that. But it may not fall under the directors and officers policy either. That's what makes it complex.
So that's why you need to have an ongoing discussion with your broker. Right?
Yeah, because depending on what they're claiming, it could fall under a liability policy with they sustain damage.
All right. I'm going to switch gears entirely because we're kind of up against the clock here, and I want to get Brett back in here about fire prevention. And one of the things is budgeting for changes maybe to your building or bringing a building up to code. So explain how Stratas had to look at their budget around fire prevention.
Yeah, I think one thing that we can do better as fire prevention companies is fire prevention is very cyclical, and there's routine maintenance items that occur. We are set schedules. Generally, they're 3 years, 5 years, and 6 years. So if we can look at a Strata's equipment and we can look at the dates on things, we can help them say, hey, listen, this year your annual inspection cost $1,000. Next year, we still have to come back and do your annual inspection. But we know already you're going to incur $1,500 in replacing fire extinguishers and full flushing your sprinkler system. If I can give the property manager that information ahead of time and he can provide that to their councils, it's going to make them, they're going to be happier with us. They're going to budget more effectively. And there's nothing worse.
No shocks, right?
Yeah, there's nothing worse than going back to councils and saying, hey, we knew about this last year. It's $5,000 worth of extra costs that you're going to incur, but they didn't set aside enough money, blows their budget, and doesn't make us look good either. So budgeting is huge in the strata world.
So I guess it's all communication, right? Expectations and delivering to expectations, right?
That's correct.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing we're really trying to focus on is helping strata's budget for their next upcoming work more effectively, and expenditures they're incurring, whether it be replacing a fire alarm panel now. I always like to go to the strata and say, okay, what's on your radar for the next 5 or 10 years? Have you done an elevator upgrade? Because a few $1,000s now on upgrading your fire alarm panel can save you $15,000 if you're doing an elevator modernization in the next 5 years. So just working towards things that can save them money long term, not just always up front right now, really, I think goes a long way in our world for sure.
Drew, that's your world, is working to people's expectations, right?
Yeah, and the more information we have to work with when it comes to budgeting, the more accurate the budget's going to be, the less surprises there's going to be. Nothing's more frustrating than budgeting $2,000 for something and finding out it's going to cost you $5,000.
Yeah.
There's a wherewithal in most cases to deal with that, but it's still frustrating.
That's the voice of Drew Grout from Key Pacific Property Management. He's the director of Strata Services. We also just heard from Brett Johnson, who's the president of Community Fire Prevention, and Gordon Lai is back again, client executive and vice president of CMW Insurance. Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's been a great show. It's called StrataLife, and we'll do it again next time right here on CL 650.